Good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jose from last time, if you remember me.
And I'm Jad.
And welcome to the Philosophy Society podcast.
Yeah, name pending though.
Yes. Today's topic, I think, is going to be about societal structures.
Yeah, we actually kind of have like 5 subtopics under that. We never really got down to narrowing it down because it's such a wide subject.
Absolutely.
So I think we started about when we started talking about it. The thing that we said إنه الحياة اللي تكون غريبة in society السوداني بتكون شنو؟
I think we made a point about the normalization of like if one were to be in Sudan and one were to sort of stay in Sudan and come here, stay outside of Sudan rather, and come here, the bizarreness of the Sudanese society, though both of them might have innately sort of been aware, perhaps more vividly at different points of times, about, the sort of incoherency. I don't know. For me personally, I think it's. I don't know. What do you think? For me, it's incoherent, illogical to some degree.
Illogical, yeah. That's because it doesn't have logic as a basis. It's like I said, religion as a backdoor. So, whatever sort of society that emerges from such ideas will, not necessarily, but it is more likely to be illogical. Like you would find a lot of discrepancies in how they, in what they sort of believe. That it's not consistent.
But then, simultaneously, and I think I don't want to jump forward, but simultaneously, it also does have. I don't know. I think last time we were flirting with the idea of we as human beings are illogical necessarily for trying to make logic out of certain things, out of specifically how human beings behave. So maybe logic exists solely in the paradigm of like mathematics and positivist science.
Positivist science?
As in the sense that positivist scientific paradigm like chemistry, like to some degree physics and like 1 + 1 = 2 and stuff like that, but as for human interactions, to kind of impose logic on it, I think would be an absurd endeavor.
See, when you said that, this is not what I thought that you meant, because there are things that are as simple as 1 + 1 = 2 in the human condition.
Like, give me an example. I think I don't know. I don't necessarily agree.
Like equality, for example.
Even equality to different people means different things. And it's based on your indoctrinated self. So even when we talk about egalitarianism, that's the concept in itself took a while to get there. I mean, even the most...
Yeah, it took a while because it's natural to sort of fall back into our, like, primitive selves and our, like, let's say, lizard brain, even though that's not really accurate. But let's say that. It's really easy to fall into tribalistic sort of behaviors or, like, habits, because that's how we survive in a simplistic world. But it's not a simplistic world anymore.
But I would argue that in that sense, then those primal sort of animations, whether it's for need or wants, those primal animations necessarily is, if logic does exist in the human sort of communication, organization, and all that stuff, necessarily that would be the logic, because of sort of biology or evolution or whatever. Necessarily the sustainability of our existence needs to be key, of my existence, for instance.
That's kind of true, but it still does not erode equality.
How do you mean?
It does not erode the fact that if I'm from a tribe and you're from another tribe, it does not erode it does not erode that we are both humans, both human beings with the same aspirations. Well, generally the same aspirations. I don't mean like to the nitty gritty of what we want for life, but that we want to sort of get the best out of this life.
Right.
For example.
Right. I think I understand that there's a sort of synonymity between what I want to achieve or what others want to achieve, but necessarily what I want to achieve in a primal sense could be an infringement of what other people's civil liberties. And I don't want to use that word.
Primal liberties.
Primal liberties, let's say.
Okay. I guess I don't understand the point.
Okay, so like I absolutely agree that quintessentially, if we're to talk biologically or if we talk to sort of in a more primal sort of rudimentary sense, all of us perhaps might want similar things.
Mm-hmm.
That I would concede to, but necessarily in order for us to achieve those things, we may need to infringe on other people's quote unquote primal.
So it's a zero-sum game.
It's a zero-sum game.
There are things to be gained and things to be lost, but they're all sum to absolute zero.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I say that the fact that trying to make logical sense out of our communication, our organization, necessarily is an illogical endeavor.
So, I guess I say that now. So, how would you rather it be?
I mean, one side of my brain is sort of pulsating and wants to sort of ooze out random vocabulary just to validate my existential sort of stance. But even that, I think, is whimsical. In a sense, I think. I don't know, if I were to say that nothing really matters and we're all, doomed and everything is futile, I think that would be a cop-out. That would be too easy. Unless it's...
Also, nihilism is not in fashion anymore.
It's not in fashion anymore, exactly. Right? And also, if I were to say that, because of my extremist nature, I suppose, I would want it to be extremely romantic. It's either all of us die instantly, right now, right this second, or none of us die and essentially continue our futile existence.
Yeah, this reminds me of the thing that you said, that I think the act of ultimate defiance or the ultimate notice me world is all of us committing suicide simultaneously.
Yes.
Can you go back to that point and explain it?
Okay. So in my spare time, I do write a little bit of what's it called? Short stories. And one of the short stories is, and this is something that for one point in my life I actually did sort of consider, which is necessarily, the story goes, it starts off with a guy that opens his eyes, wakes up in the morning, and all he sees around him is white. So the walls are white, the sheets in his bed are white, the doors are, everything around him is white. And so he sort of
does he see shade? Does he see that there is a door?
He sees that there's a door, but necessarily the quintessential sort of aesthetic is whiteness, blandness. And so he sort of ponders and sort of like, well, any second now, any moment now, sort of Burgundy is going to make a ceremonious entrance into the scheme and perhaps jolt this staticness into sort of animation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sort of thinks about those things, and even in his interactions with people, and he comes to the conclusion that the reason why I necessarily want there to be, or I want there to be recognition or validation, and who it's from, I think is more important. Not the reason why perhaps it's a little bit vague, but who it's from, and he talks about sort of in a perhaps an agnostic-esque sort of way. He says that the cosmos needs to identify that I exist. Mm-hmm. And so in order for all of us as human beings to make that huge titanic effort of just to validate our existence to the cosmos, which is, titanic, necessarily there need to all move and sort of stop moving, stop animating, and die. And it's not even committing suicide.
It's just dying
it's just
by sheer will.
Exactly. So just ceasing to do anything and just staying static, and essentially everyone dies. And that will create two alternatives. Either the universe is going to be like, hey, once upon a time in planet Earth or whatever, there existed humans, and now they're gone. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the other alternative is the cosmos would not care about our existence. And so everything that we do every single day, every single animation is to validate something. To validate to the, that's how the protagonist is. Mm-hmm. Is to validate to the universe. And this ultimate sort of collective sacrifice is the ultimate sort of sacrifice. So if this doesn't work, nothing else. Exactly. Nothing else.
Why is it the ultimate sacrifice? Because there is nothing more to give?
There's nothing more to give. You've exhausted all the efforts possible in that sort of one move.
Mm-hmm. But why would it sort of jolt the universe into action? Supposing that the universe is capable of action, mm-hmm. how would it jolt the universe into action?
It would do something. That's the thing. It would do something. You know what I mean? It's something greater than us necessarily. Like if we could all agree, it would be the universe is greater than us, and it's so to move the universe into doing something based on what our sort of infinitesimal, futile, mm-hmm. Collectivism. That's something. That's the dream. That is living your best life, quote unquote.
It's like the emergent sort of intelligence that we talked about before. It's like none of us are complex beings, but together we form a unified, complex entity.
Of course, and should we rewind a little bit and talk about the things, the points, the 5 points that you mentioned earlier?
I think we're going to get to that.
Okay.
Before the points, the thing about this sort of move, why would you? What? You're excused. Why would we want the universe to sort of acknowledge us? And if it does, mm-hmm. what then?
Why would we want it to acknowledge us? Because if we don't, what is the alternative? For us to just live randomly and survive mm-hmm. and exist?
Is it sort of like, how this sounds to me? It sounds to me like if suddenly all fish stopped swimming for no reason and just died in place. So we were bound to notice it.
In this analogy, you would consider us to be higher
forms of existence, yeah.
Which is absolutely amazing. Fish have done the best thing that they could do to get our attention.
To get our attention, exactly. It would seem like that they are capable of intentionality, not just surviving from this food source to the next food source to mating to reproducing.
Right. Which is,
and I think fish came into my mind first because I do think we live like fish. I don't think so. In the grand scheme of things, most of us just cruise through life.
Should?
No, not should. Okay. We do cruise through life.
We do, okay.
By, sort of walking the line under the walls, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We just get born or thrust into existence, like you say. Get born, and we sort of get educated or not to work, to live, to pass on genes. That's it. The only thing that is greater than us is the collective knowledge that we garner, which is something kind of recent in humanity, like the collective intelligence of all of us, mm-hmm. which is science, which is why science is becoming more and more fashionable. Mm-hmm. with every sort of generation. It becomes the new craze. Mm-hmm. And it's not undeserved, by the way. It's the only thing that we have made that is greater than us. You know what I mean?
I understand what you mean. Mm-hmm. But okay, fair enough. Let's take that. Let's say that it is not necessarily a continuum, but right now, in our progress, necessarily, we have come together and we've did what you said exactly. We've created science, which is greater than us. what is greater than science?
That is hard to know because we haven't really explored everything that collective intelligence might be able to achieve.
And there you go. So okay, if we say it's greater than science, let's say there's something else that comes along, and then greater than that something as well, and then greater than that. What I'm saying is, completely ceasing to exist is annihilating the possibilities of those greater things to exist. And that is the ultimate. So even our potential, the potentiality and the possibilities that we've seized all of those. And perhaps that is, in a romantic sense, our goal in life, I think. In a romantic sense, just exhaust.
It's like, I'm not going to play your game, universe.
Yeah.
Like that.
Exactly.
That is, I think, would be like the teenage years of humanity. Which is perfect because we are in the teenage years. No, not exactly. We're like in the prepubescent years of humanity. Still like getting to know our sort of power, abilities, and that there are that life in general is more complex than it is, and we are more complex than initially thought. So, yeah, I think if I could put it on a scale, this sort of era in humanity would be like the prepubescent era. Mm-hmm. We still need to hit puberty, which is like lashing out and stuff.
So, fair enough. I would like to see that. That's just humanity on sort of hormone craze, sort of binges going around and everything.
I mean, I guess we're like in the start of that.
Like global warming?
See, global warming is like sort of eating a lot of candy and then realizing that it was a bad idea, and then you suffer for a while. This is
or infinity. Or you get diabetes.
Well, if we really screw the planet, then yeah.
Which is a perfect analogy, I would argue, because we're consuming so much, but we're not sort of not necessarily digesting, but we're not moving. It's just necessarily hoarding necessarily natural resources and wealth and all that stuff, and that's it.
Which comes from like our mentality, the primal mentality that it is a zero-sum game right now. But it isn't. It really isn't.
Is it not, though?
It isn't. Because knowledge is sort of... knowledge in general, or like development, benefits everyone. We're not seeking resources anymore. Mm-hmm. Resources can like feed or support all of us, all of humanity. It's just a matter of how to distribute them. And this sounds very communist. But suppose in a perfect world there are no states, no borders, nothing. Everyone is totally equal. Everyone gets education to the highest available degree. And they can seek whatever sort of path they want to seek. Now, because we're different, every person has a different question in their minds. Mm-hmm. And they will think about the information that they're given in a different way. That means, by simple statistics, the amount of questions that you get and the people who would want to answer these questions exponentially increases with how many people you educate. So this advances science way faster. That's why science is sort of like in an exponential growth. It used to be so slow, but now we can't keep up anymore. What I'm saying is, suppose that the cure for cancer is depends on a specific sort of question or a specific point of view or an angle that nobody has looked at yet. Mm-hmm. And because of the way that this person thinks, they would sort of ask that specific question.
Okay.
Do you get what I mean? But if they do not get that sort of education, they would never get the chance to do that. Most of the advances that we make they just sort of start with a question or like a sort of quirky question that nobody really asked.
Okay.
And they turn to be extremely beneficial to humanity.
But see, okay, just to go back to my example of being illogical, I mean, that sounds... the reason why I would say that in itself, which is a brilliant sort of, I wouldn't say utopia, because I think utopia now would be a sort of an insult. You know what I mean? Like something, I mean, but I wouldn't say utopia, but that sounds like an ideal sort of, not even egalitarian, but just an ideal world to live in. The reason why I would say it's illogical for us to have logic, such as this, which makes logical sense. I mean, you've used statistics to come figure the how we might be able to cure cancer as an example, you know, and many other things, obviously. But the reason why I say it's illogical is because that, and I don't mean to be bleak, right? But that will absolutely not happen. Not for us not to have borders, and for us not to.
Yeah, of course. Of course, it won't happen. Look at us. But yeah, that would, I think, only happen in
if Jeremy Corbyn becomes elected the new prime minister of England. Sorry, I just had to push that out there.
Okay. We do not endorse any politicians or anything. This is just the opinion of Khoidili, his personal opinion. Okay, disclaimer over. What was I saying? Yeah.
It will only happen.
It will only happen at the sort of twilight of humanity. I say twilight, but I think if we reach that point, humanity is going to go on forever. But it's sort of when we are like sort of retiring, I think. If knowledge is finite, the only point we're gonna like sort of come together and as humans would be like right before it by an era or two.
Right before it by an era, and then what happens? Do we become static? Like
it's sort of like a black hole. Because a black hole sort of like consumes its not a black hole, I mean a star. A star, before it dies, it consumes its fuel faster and faster and faster.
And so you think that we
consume science faster and faster. So right when we all fuse into the final state, that's when science like that ends.
Okay.
And by science, I don't mean just like hard science, like codes and physics and stuff like that. I mean like even humanities.
Okay. But okay, that would assume that science is finite.
Yeah. But is it not?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the theory of the expansion. Okay, let's just go to cosmology a little bit. But the theory of the universe expanding. Does that mean that if we were to look at it from a cosmological point of view, does that mean that with every expansion or like every sort of whatever, because it continuously expanding, every expansion, does that mean that necessarily that's a new thing to be discovered, quote unquote?
Every time that the universe expands?
Is it the universe keeps on expanding?
Yeah, it does continue expanding. It's actually accelerating.
Exactly. So the continuation of this what's it called? Expansion. Doesn't that mean that there's more things to explore? Or are you talking about? I think I get what you mean. So in that analogy that I said that the universe keeps on expanding, our sort of accelerated way of absorbing and utilizing. Let's just say science, quote unquote, because it could be a plethora of things, but science necessarily. Our ability to grasp what is science and how to utilize it and how to sort of absorb it and digest it is faster than the expansion of the universe. Would that be accurate to say, to get from what you said?
I mean, faster how? I don't understand.
Faster in the sense that, this is
how are we comparing like science speed with the universe expansion speed?
It's a very I think that's a little bit ill-guided analogy, but
it's very interesting though.
It's just like, I don't know, because the exploration of the universe necessarily doesn't mean that the expansion of the universe doesn't necessarily mean the expansion of science necessarily.
Yeah, in fact, it's sort of a ticking time bomb or like a ticking clock, because or how far we can see is sort of shrinking, I think, because of complicated relativity things. But it's like we live in a bubble in which the expansion of the universe sort of pushes material out of that bubble that we can see.
Okay.
Because the speed of light is sort of a constant. Without getting into like the complicated sciencey stuff, the longer we wait, the less there is to explore in that bubble.
Okay. That poses so many different questions that I just okay. Fair enough. Okay, let's move these sort of analogies and like sort of scientific, but let's hypothetically say that science is infinite, right? And both these are hypothetical. I would
both
argue.
of them hypothetically.
Let's say science is infinite, and then how would that analogy work? Your analogy necessarily for us becoming the perfect form.
Well, if science is infinite, we're gonna hit like a critical point in which we realize we may never hit it, Aslan, because there are two ways that humanity might go: is that we expand and leave Earth, or not.
Okay.
If we don't leave Earth, we might become like sort of a unified people. But if we do, that is going to make unification much harder. Can you imagine it?
Right.
It's like sort of like the American colony, whereas we got there, then it's like, hi, psych. Here's your tea. Back into the ocean.
Fair enough. Huh. I think that we might have just exhausted all our sort of cosmology related analogies.
Also, just in time, because this should be the end of part 1. Yeah, it's like 27 minutes. Okay. This is the end of part 1, and we're gonna roll back, I think, into the what was it? The existential thing. Not the very first 5 topics. The existential sort of cry.
Right, for the universe, look at me, validate my existence and all that.
Exactly. We're gonna like we went through so many topics. So we're gonna like roll the tape backwards a few steps and keep doing that until like we finish all the subjects.
I think what's also interesting, it's almost like a pendulum swing, in the sense that it goes from existentialism to like cosmology to like, and then going back to existentialism.
Yeah.
So
Started so small. Okay. Anyway, this is the end of part 1 of episode 2. And before I forget, no, we are not ignoring whatever feedback that you got for this podcast. It is just that it took time to approve the podcast. So we're recording this episode before we ever read anything. So keep that in mind. But we are listening. I think this is in the future. We are listening to you. That's it.
Which also may pose an interesting sort of question of relativity. I mean, we are in the future talking to you in the past. No, we're in the past talking to you in the future, rather. But more on that crazy stuff on our next episode and the episodes.
Next part. Yeah.
But thank you guys for listening, and as always, don't forget to subscribe, share, like, tell your friends about it. And for those who are driving or heading to work, hope you have a good day, and see you next time, or see you in a bit. Bye.
Yeah.